and when we say expert breakdown, that's really more Matt is the expert. Although I've seen quite a lot in our tenure as SD-WAN, as an SD-WAN provider. And, you know, we're going to play with the format a little bit different and more have Matt and I have a conversation around the SD-WAN space and have more of a dialogue. And we've got a bunch of slides that we may get to, we may not. I think as the conversation flows, we're going to try this format out. I think everyone's getting used to that the new normal will be these kind of video sessions. And so we're experimenting with a lot of different formats and getting great feedback on those new formats. So we thought we'd try our best. I'm a big Joe Rogan Experience podcast fan, so why not have it more like a long form conversation between myself and Matt Douglas. So Matt, when we talk about SD-WAN, I laugh because I thought of last year, I think you had 121 nights on the road in 2019,
yes.
Where most of those were day one was a meeting with a client or a partner about a strategy around SD-WAN, spend the night, day two was another meeting, and then a flight home, which really means you had 200 plus days of meetings and looking at examples. And so I think you are really one of the experts in the industry. I'd put you up against anyone that has seen a lot of different designs.
Oh, I appreciate
and as
that.
we talk, you know, we're not always the best fit. And I think while we have a lot of solutions that are fits in certain spaces, you've been very agnostic. So I'm curious on that agnostic front, not CBTS related or our partners. You know, maybe we start by kicking around why, just the pure truth of why are companies moving to SD-WAN? Why are our partners
absolutely
really making an impact?
Well, one, it's still early in the adoption phase, right? And you talked about that kind of consultative approach because we're not always the right fit. You know, we've chosen what we think are some market leading technologies, but it's really about understanding the customer's applications where they sit today, if you would. You know, what applications are running site to site, which are running site to data center, where are they moving in the cloud? Because there's, you know, sometimes, I mean, I literally was on a phone call, you know, this would happen to be a WebEx about 9 months ago. We're 20 minutes into discovery, and I said, you know what, we're not the right fit. You need to be talking to Big Leaf. Now, you know, we're actually VeloCloud's #1. We're right there. Right now, they're reigning partner of the year, and VeloCloud's the #1 technology out there. But you know, you can't be all things to all people. You've got to meet with the customer. You've got to kind of find out what are the business outcomes they're looking for. And I think that's been a lot of our success and you know, out there in the field. So it's.
What do you see as the common thread? I mean, if you were to you're sitting down at dinner with someone that's not educated on this SD-WAN technology, and they're like, I hear you're saying you've got some new secret sauce called SD-WAN. I don't understand, but why would a company make a move? What really is at the end of the day the driver maybe you're seeing, or a couple drivers that that really it boils down to?
I mean, think about our world, right? At Cincinnati Bell, when you went back to CBTS, we're part of that whole group. Excuse me, I'm not supposed to use that name, but think about where we came from, right? We were an exchange house. We had our own internal email system. We had our own internal CRM tool. We had our own internal customer service technical support platform. We're now an Office 365, Salesforce, and ServiceNow shop, right? And so these networks that got built over time to bring everything back to headquarters or data centers are just not applicable anymore. They don't have the bandwidth. They don't have, you know, security is a whole other question, but they don't have the bandwidth, and our application flows are changing. So I'll sit down with, just sit down with the customer and say, tell me about where your applications are going. Well, we've already moved Office 365 or maybe moved to Salesforce. Well, are you thinking about moving any of your workloads to AWS or Azure? Oh yeah, we've got a pilot for that right now. So this world of really, we start to talk to customers today that it's becoming a network of clouds. And whatever overlay sits on top of that has got to be able to route applications reliably, get them there with a quality of service. And then now security, the conversation around security is completely changed now too. So this, I think in the channel for us, for our partners, and for us, it really allows us to get deeper in the stack and build a deeper relationship with customers. I mean, we found that in UCaaS, right? Our turnover on our UCaaS is like 0.2% or whatever. We've got customers we've had on our UCaaS platform for 10 years now. So I think this is the same kind of thing in SD-WAN. It allows us now, all of us in the channel, to come in there. We used to just sling circuits, right? Just speeds and feeds. And now this gives us an opportunity to get in and start talking about their business. What are they trying to do? Where are they moving forward, towards? And it becomes a lot stickier platform, I think, to be have a consultative approach.
So it sounds like if you were to lean on one driver, it sounds like as applications move out of the legacy model of the applications live in the core data center of the company to as those move into the cloud, then SD-WAN is the network of networks to get them there. Is your biggest driver.
No question.
See,
now, go ahead.
I see a different side, which is I see that, but I also see massive frustration with customers who are tired of the buying model through very large national and international carriers. These companies, when I first started talking about SD-WAN with customers, they fought like hell to get MPLS to every one of their sites. I remember talking to a bank that had, I think, 200 locations, and they had been trying to orchestrate a plan to get MPLS to every site, and it was expensive, and it took a long time to get implemented, but they finally got it done. And then they felt like they were held hostage by this massive MPLS carrier that then really controlled, while they had the QoS, they really controlled everything. And they were stuck in this long-term carrier agreement. And the promise of SD-WAN was, it's all vanilla IP. Go out and get an internet circuit and a backup, whether it's 4G or cable, and the vanilla internet is the transport. And then the SD-WAN, the promise and the freedom of SD-WAN was that you as the customer control all the, maybe it's not QoS, but it's quality of experience, and now you're setting the thresholds and what traffic you prefer. And to me, it was customers being tired of being held hostage, and they just wanted the freedom to break free. And oh, by the way, you don't see this much. There's cost savings with that move, and there's just empowerment. Where I remember we were just on with a law firm about a month ago, and the longest pole in their tent in converting from one strategy to another was that they said, oh, well, we're going to have to go out and talk to, I won't pick on the carrier, but a national carrier that said, well, we've got a spur that goes off to the internet, but to get all those routing changes, they basically had to get, a colonoscopy and a note from their mother to get those changes done, to where if that's SD-WAN, they just make a policy change in the device.
Oh, no, I think you bring up, I get very focused on applications because I love that part. But I think when you talk to customers too, all of us in the channel here as consultants, we need to pay attention. There are different drivers. We've been into businesses about this aspect. You kind of brought up the aspect of agility, right? One, I can build a solution on top of any kind of internet. Now I might decide I want to have fiber at certain locations with a cable backup. Maybe cable's good enough with a 4G backup for other locations, kind of depends. And we've got one pizza chain that, takes 50% of their calls to a store for revenue generation, and they've been running for 3 years on a cable and 4G LTE, right? So one, to your point, you can decide whatever circuit you want. So now you're no longer at hostage to some big, to the big boys. But, kind of, again, talking to a customer, trying to find what are their hot points or what are their kind of emotional things that I want to make sure I address. One of those is agility. I can't tell you the number of times, right? I mean, when you think about business going back 10, 15 years ago, it was not the same kind of environment we're in today, where acquisitions are happening more often, stores are closing, stores are going up. And so the agility and ability to be flexible and to bring a new acquisition of 5 locations into your environment. Well, in the MPLS days, right, to get an MPLS circuit, we'd be lucky to have one up and running in 3, 4. I'm sure many people in this phone call have been involved with SD-WAN deployment. MPLS deployments taken 6 months to get a circuit in a location. So again, I think it goes back to the consulting we want to do with a company to find out what are the things they're trying to do. And sometimes that might be agility. It might be cost savings. But yeah, suddenly now you've got the ability to I always go back to this term, an outcome-based network. And so one of the things when I'm talking to a customer too, I'll say that, hey, in the MPLS world, at least you were assured, right? You always were comfortable that when you marked a packet in the SD-WAN world, EF marker for a voice, and it was going to reliably get to the other end. Well, these SD-WAN technologies, and we're going to go in depth with this a lot more in the next session we have, talking about VeloCloud in particular. We've got John Lloyd, who actually is our product manager for that we're going to go a little bit deeper into some of these technologies. But these technologies today now have the ability to actually fix packet loss end to end for a voice call even. So you've got an opportunity to talk to customers, find out what their business problems are, bring in any kind of circuit, then talk about applications, and then be able to assure them that they're going to be able to get the same, if not better, quality of service over the internet that they were over a one MPLS link. So it is a whole other conversation now.
Yeah, I do want to hit on that. The agility thing is interesting because, I think everybody, customers, partners, service providers, design what they think, during an implementation or a plan. And then when you get into implementation, things happen. A lot of times to our UCaaS, in large UCaaS installations, we'll set up basically a direct connection, a private connection, and a lot of times that's MPLS between the customer and our data center.
Sure.
But many times, we use an underlying carrier for that. You're right; those timeframes. Recently, we had a customer that was 9 months. For one of the carriers. And so we wanted diverse carriers, and it was either wait for that carrier to finally install, or let's get up and running with SD-WAN as the backup, just get, vanilla internet and SD-WAN. Same thing with stores. We have a lot of retail clients that, they've got FOC dates with maybe a broadband provider or fiber for their main connection, but then they say the franchise needs to turn up the store and take an order by the end of the month. Can we ship a VeloCloud with a Cradlepoint and 4G on it and start taking orders? And so where you used to have to delay an install for a store that, because of a FOC date of a local internet provider, even, you can get them up and running with mobile. And now it's that business outcome you talked about. So agility's there.
No question. We spend a lot of times too talking to customers about the store of the future or the branch of the future as part of that agility. So we're dealing with a construction firm that places trailers out on sites for a year here, 6 months here, 2 years there. In the past, for them, when they had their own phone system, they had to try and put firewalls out there, build VPNs, manage all that. Now we've come in with, an SD-WAN edge, right? VeloCloud Edge in this case, security, actually cloud security in this environment, right? A UCAS phone doesn't even have to be ours. It could have been somebody else's, but it could be ours in this situation. And suddenly now we've got a store of the future that could be deployed over a dynamic IP DSL connection if you want, that went in a week, let's say.
Yeah.
So this companies today, just like all of us, right? Think about all the companies, for any of us who've worked for larger companies, IT staffs are getting shrunk every day, right? And IT staffs are trying, they've got enough on their plate trying to keep the lights running, the lights on, that can we come in and help them do that, give them these overlays, give them the quality assurance, be that partner so they can start to focus on more strategic, things in their business. And it's just happening across the industry. So.
Yeah. And I think we went into this a little skeptical because, I think it's 4 or 5 years ago when SD-WAN came out, we wanted to embrace it to help our UCAS, price points, quite frankly, because, if you remember, Matt, 4 or 5 years ago, we only ever delivered, we never went down the over the top with, with voice.
We had to have a circuit.
You had to have a circuit, but that meant our price point, when you bake the circuit into the business case, the price per handset was ridiculous. So we looked at SD-WAN for voice, and we went in very skeptical that, and we've talked about this before. We put a lot of different providers into a lab and looked at it. Gabby, if you don't mind, find the slide.
I've got it right here.
Yeah, you've got it. The red and the green.
Yeah, let me
not that one. The other one on just first of all the
this right, sure.
Of the circuit.
Yep.
There's kind of two reasons. One is just by having 2 circuits, and we'll go back to one because I know you like to talk about that in this next slide. But on the before, if you're looking at the before on the left-hand side, and you could have MPLS in there as the circuit.
Could be anything.
You could have 4G. You could have anything in there. This notion of, if we're going to go from what was this reliance on MPLS with QoS to some new thing, and I even like it better when you replace MPLS with, like in this, another broadband carrier.
Sure.
Is it better? Is it going to work? Can you really have an after scenario where it's green when the other two are red, yellow, green, all over the place? And that proof was transformational for us. It's really in there for a lot of these. Some are packet based and some are flow based, and maybe hit on that. But and you can use both in different play in different scenarios. But
well, we didn't believe it till we put it in a lab, right, Rob? I mean, the bottom line is, before we got in this business, we took our R&D department, we built a lab, built application flows, built the ability to inject error, jitter, and latency, and build a test plan to test voice, video, desktop application, site to site, site to data center, site to cloud, because we didn't believe it.
Right.
And the truth of the matter is that some of these technologies, like you're talking about, can literally combine to and fix things. And where I was going before that, I get excited about, this was the thing that was kind of revolutionized for us what SD-WAN can do, in that in our lab, first 4 years ago, and now out in the field with numerous customers. You think about in the past, right, when we're talking about having a phone call and it being delivered across the internet, typically you can't have any quality of service, right? There's no way to keep track of that, right? But the truth of the matter is, if you kind of, these new technologies, if you say packets are leaving, I'm talking on the phone call here, and packets are leaving 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and they get to the other side of the internet, right? And I'm missing packet 2, I'm missing packet 5, 3, and 4 out of order. That's the traditional problem, why you couldn't have QoS for a phone call or for my applications across the internet. That was always the thing, that MPLS was going to reliably deliver that circuit. We're growing out of MPLS because our applications are moving to the cloud. We're growing out of it because of bandwidth and the cost. But smart IT people are still saying, okay, how are you going to deliver a quality service though for some of my key applications, of which oftentimes voice is one of those? Well, in this scenario, some of these better technologies have a forward error correction protocol, VeloCloud in particular, that says, wait a minute, I'm seeing a mess over here. I got what would normally be an unusable phone call. And in the middle of that stream, unbeknownst to the phone here, these technologies start duplicating the stream, right? And even if there's packet loss, now I'm missing packet 1 and 6, it adds those up, right? And I got a happy phone call. I've actually fixed an application across the internet, right? Well, this stuff was unheard of 5 or 6 years ago. So again, this conversation, I think these game changers of where are your applications sitting today? We know we're going to have to move to the internet. Well, this new fabric had better take care of those. What's the business outcomes I'm looking for in this network of clouds? And this is just an example of these technologies can actually fix packet loss and, deliver phone calls up to 30% packet loss, like in the case of voice, and still have a phone call, which has just been unheard of.
Yeah. If I'm a partner and maybe I've sold some of this in the past, or a customer, I think, okay, it sounds awesome. It sounds great. It also may sound a little too good to be true. Where does this stuff fall down? Even if, if we're touting ourselves as, juggernauts in the SD-WAN space, where do we see it fall down? And I've got a couple thoughts on that, because I think talking transparently with partners, that are listening to this, and even customers, where are the gotchas? And to me, there's kind of 3 points that during the journey of SD-WAN that are important.
You tell me what you think those are, and I'll respond. Go ahead. Yes.
I think one, the notion of a zero touch installation is misleading. I
would agree with that.
It's much easier, a hell of a lot much easier than, putting routers in and configuring with a private network. But to say it's zero touch, yes, there's cloud orchestration, and yes, you can upload, but there is touching that has to happen. And I think we've worked hard to wrap a process. It's not always perfect, but we've skinned our knees enough to get it to where we can install a lot of sites for a customer in a short amount of time with a high amount of reliability. But to say, and I know a lot of the OEMs say zero touch, that seems misleading.
I completely agree. The zero touch aspect is the fact that what is great about an SD-WAN appliance, and most all of them do it today, is that once I plug it in the network, it phones home and it gets its configuration. The days are gone of having to log into it on a serial port, upload it, make sure it's the right config, etc. But in building this next generation network, there is a lot that goes into what's our IP structure today? Where are we moving to? What's secure? The security is going to change. There is a lot of consulting that we, skinned our knees early on. We've had a bunch, I'm using a marketing term, there are a bunch of deals where we've come in that they've bought, SD-WAN, particularly VeloCloud, from another partner, and we've come in and cleaned it up, right? So we take the pre-sales design and the project management very seriously, because although the box is zero touch, the deployment is not an easy button. It's got to be done right if you're not going to affect customers' business.
That's the second point, which was, I think a lot of partners in the space are used to UCaaS, which they maybe pull out an on-prem and they put in a UCaaS, and in an install, you can get 98% of it right, and maybe there's like this weird thing that the client didn't tell you about.
Great way to put it.
That you learn either on the fly and you nail it, or you kind of get to it in the next, couple days and you get there. When you start messing with a client's network, and firewall rules and all of these other things, you have to have that completely ironed out. And to just say, well, we're slamming in SD-WAN on Friday. We went through a lot of best practices, and we call it our network design document, which becomes our Bible that we've had to fix. I think that's just a misnomer in this space. Again, I'm talking generally for our partners, that you better be finding a provider that's going to dive deep into your customer's architecture and design so that everything works during the move, right?
Yeah, particularly as you're moving to multi-locations. I'll get it. I'll give you that there are situations, like, it depends where you're trying to fit to, right? I mentioned Big Leaf earlier. There's other players in this business. Big Leaf focuses a lot on a single location, 5 people. That's a little bit different than the moment we step into 3 locations, 50 people, 100, 200, these kinds of things. So I think that, yes, deployment it is not the easy button that many had tried to tout sometimes.
Yeah. The third is, and I know we've worked with a lot of different OEMs on SD-WAN. I think to tell a customer that this piece of hardware in your environment will do all these great things, the functionality is there and that part works. I think one of the things that I think everybody recognizes, but we continue to tell customers, particularly if we're going to talk about HA, is that sometimes those devices have a bad day. Sometimes there's an OEM makes an update, right, with version control, and there's releases. And so there are things that you've got to make sure you've got a tight working relationship between the service provider and the OEM to coordinate all of those moves, at all of the changes that, in our case, let's pick on VeloCloud, make during their roadmap. We've got to make sure we're dialed in, or else, a customer could feel the pain when a version gets moved, or and that's all part of that management. But those devices, SD-WAN's moving so fast. I think this is just my other kind of, if you're going to talk about all the great things of SD-WAN, we got to talk about the risks a little bit. And it's moving so fast that all these vendors are keeping up and keeping pace, which is great. But that speed and velocity can create some version control that you better have a tight working relationship with the service provider.
Oh, no, I think that's been a value proposition for us. We handled 2 of the largest platforms, VeloCloud and Meraki, and you can go back in the last 4 years and there's been a number of situations that code changes have happened. Not, we didn't do them. Both those both those OEMs did it, and we had to be able to understand that and help pick up the pieces. So I think we're at the top of the hour here, Rob.
Okay.
One of the things I wanted to pass on, I mentioned it earlier, but I want to talk about where we're going with the series here. One, we hope some of these, kind of our back and forth here has been a little bit useful to kind of talk about what we see some of that value proposition and how what you should be mentioning to customers, et cetera. Next week, we're going to go a deep dive into VeloCloud technology in particular, literally how packets are flowing, how the cloud gateways are used, how we VPN into third parties, cloud security. It's going to be a very detailed presentation. So I'm excited about that one with John Lloyd. And then the third one is a big deal. And I think anybody who's listening right here, even if you don't come, to the second one, come to the third. We've got Chris Connor, who is, that's the right name, right, Gabby? Oh, she's probably on mute.
Sorry, Craig Connors.
Craig, okay. I knew that's why I was confirming. Craig Connors, who is the CTO and VP in VeloCloud. He was the brains behind all the code on VeloCloud and Talari. You can actually go into his LinkedIn and look it up. And so this guy is a wealth of knowledge on where the market's going, where it's been, what he's seeing. I mean, this is a big time player. So I'm very excited about that third session as well. We're going to do a kind of a panel discussion and have him involved. So thanks for joining, Rob. If you want to have any parting words, but I just wanted to say thanks. We love doing these things and we're looking forward to the next 2 of them. But go ahead, Rob.
No, it's great talking to you, Matt. I only get to talk to you 4 times a day. So
that's
this
so
5th
true.
one is it's even better. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Really quick, we did have a couple of questions that came through. I tried to answer them as you guys sent them through, but I didn't get to a couple. So we will have Matt email you directly with the answers to those.
Be happy to. Yep.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.